Recording in progress.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to School of Speech presented by Speech Therapy PD. I am your host, Carolyn Dolby, and I am so glad, and you're going to be so glad that you are tuning in today, because today we are welcoming back my friend, Dr. Maria Rosa Brea, for a second part, a part two, spotting the ideology of good languaging. Dr. Brea-Spahn is a Spanish oh my gosh, Spanglish, there I got it. Oh my gosh, I did it last time too. Oh, that's silly. And an English communicator as a speech language pathologist and a university teacher scholar whose work has been centered around the intersection of multilingualism and disability. Her classroom and community collaborations focus on researching the impact of standardized linguistic ideologies in speech language practices, sustaining variability in languaging in the classroom, and co-envisioning a path for linguistic liberation, people, through art. Now, if you have not seen our first, Maria's first episode or listened, I'm going to pop the link in the chat in just a minute so that you guys will have it, because you're going to want to go back and definitely take a listen to that one. But as we settle in for another amazing episode, I do want to remind all of you, we've got a lot in our listening audience today, that if you are listening, if your state requires ASHA CEUs, that well, actually each episode of School of Speech is offered for 0.1 ASHA CEUs. And if you need live CEUs and you're here listening live, guess what? You can get those. You just have to make sure that after you listen today, you go straight to your Speech Therapy PD account and fill out all those modules, including the one that says complete course. And you do need to do that today to make sure that you get credit for live CEUs. All right, so let's just get through some more housekeeping and get right into it, because I know that Maria has a lot to share with us today. Disclosures, Dr. Brea-Spahn is a full-time employee of New York University with no non-financials. Me, I'm a salaried employee of Portland Public Schools, and I also receive compensation from speech therapy for hosting School of Speech. Non-disclosures, I consult districts across the nation, putting their dysphagia programs together. And that's enough about me. All right. Hi, Maria. How are you?
Hola, my dear.
I
I'm
am
doing great.
I am so glad to see you. I needed to see you today because I've been excited all day that I was going to get to connect with you again. I absolutely loved when you were on last time. Oh, I have to remind myself to make sure I'm going to put that in I don't forget to put that link in the chat, because you guys are going to want to go and definitely listen to part one. Okay, I know that we have a lot to get into, but I think for any of those that have not listened to part one, I think it would be good, and it would be good for me too, because I've slept since then, to, if you don't mind, like, if we could just back up a little bit, and if you don't mind, sort of like doing a recap of the last episode, and then going into definitely the definition of languaging. I know we were kind of talking about that, but I need it from you.
Yes. Thank you again. And hi, everybody. It's so good to share space with everyone. So the last time Carolyn and I sat down to have a conversation here, we talked a little bit about language beliefs. Beliefs as in beliefs that we have or ideas that we have about what language is, right? And that came out of a paper that was written and published in 2023. But I think that the piece to take away from that is that every single one of us grows up learning, especially in the field that we are in, what language is. And that usually that language definition is positioned as a noun in our lexicon. So when I say as a noun, I mean that we are taught that language is a system of rules, a set of structures, maybe sentences, sounds, involving sentences, sounds, morphemes, social skills of a community. We understand that we are learning that system of rules from our communities and especially from our institutions, because that's where the notion of academic language, which is also something that we come up with, comes from, right? And that legitimate language that we are taught that we use all the time is has a grammar, and that grammar, you know, depending upon your belief system, you might have been exposed to, you know, it's universally, you know, acquired or learned, right? If you put the article A, since I'm speaking with SLPs, before the word language or the noun language, then we know that a language is another way in which we use the term language in our field, which means that people from different places, geographically speaking, speak a specific version of a code, right? Or a variety of a code. And then, of course, there's also like the varieties that we might speak if we, quote unquote, code switch or come into being a different kind of person depending upon the context in which we're interacting. Okay, so again, every single time we talk about language in that way, we are talking about it like a noun, as in something that can be analyzed systematically, observed, measured, right? That's the role of the SLP who does language intervention. So that's one definition of language that we all are well acquainted with. And so in the last few years, I have been very interested in wondering a lot about why is it that we define language in this way? And when we define language this way, which is what we talked about last time, what are our beliefs of good language? Where does that idea of good language comes from? And so that's what we covered a little bit last week. But part of this conversation of like, where do the beliefs come from, which are all based on like, again, exposure to institutionalized ways of knowing that there's one way that makes you sound smart. There's one way that makes you sound, quote unquote, intelligible. There's one way that, quote unquote, makes you sound educated. And that's the way that we advance through society, especially this society, which is very individualistic in nature, right? The US American society. Then I came upon, late in my career, right? Because I've been an academician for like 20 years, into this more expansive and sort of like related. Doesn't mean that I have to abandon all these other ideas of language as a noun. I still need those, right? But into expanding my definition into language as a verb. So what does that mean? That means that while we grow up learning that language is this noun, maybe you can take a deep breath and be transported now to being a child and remember yourself or twirling, swinging, touching the grass, feeling the breeze, or maybe you've taken a walk lately or you've sat under a tree. I spent my 2 weeks that were off sitting under a tree reading, because that's how nerdy I am.
I love it.
And so that, under the notion of language as a verb, all of those sensorial experiences become part of how we language too. And so you notice that I use how we language. So
Love it.
already
Yeah.
positioning language as a verb means that language is active, meaning that we use it. We use our bodies for it. I'm using my hands. You know, a lot of cultures can also use, a lot of people in different communities can use a lot of their faces. When I first moved to the United States, I'm a Dominican. When I first moved to the United States at the age of 17, I used to use my nose to like wrinkle it and say, what's up, right? I don't use that anymore because that's not been understood by the people with whom I am communicating with all the time. So under a notion of languaging or language as a verb, all of those extra, what are called like extra linguistic skills, or the icing on the cake of how we use language, actually are language too. In addition to that, we're talking here, whatever you gain as the meaning in this conversation, and we are using speech here, spoken language, but not every person communicates through spoken language, as we know, especially a lot of our clients, maybe family members, right? And maybe we ourselves sometimes might use the phone and send an emoji. That's also not communicating through spoken language per se. That's using an icon or some kind of a symbol. That symbol carries a message. That message is received in a certain way by the person who reads the message on the other side of the phone, or you are receiving what I'm saying, the tone of my voice, the way that I'm moving, if you're able to see me, you know, whatever the case may be, making meaning in that space. And so I want you to kind of hone into those two terms, making meaning. SLPs have not learned, because this is something that I learned from educational linguistics, that languaging, that language is about making meaning, and that meaning that is made is never static, meaning that words may have supposedly static meanings in the dictionary, but how we use them and when we use them in a context are going to vary what that meaning is. And who the person is listening to the words or observing the words that I'm signing or saying on the other side are also going to be making meaning out of those words themselves. If I'm telling a joke, but I'm telling it in Spanish, only a few of you might understand what that joke in Spanish is. And if I'm not a good joke teller, you're not going to really even get to laugh about it. So there's a lot to the meaning of the ways in which we use language that are embedded in that space. So that's two things I've told you. One, language is active. It's with our bodies, right? We need all of it. It's inside of us. And two, it needs other people for the meaning to happen. The third piece is that it is dynamic, meaning it is ever changing. And I think that that's crucial for those of us who are purists when it comes to linguistics and grammar. And look, I did literacy for a long portion of my career. So unlearning some of those ideas to give my inner child and the inner children of the people that with whom I'm learning in the university setting some reprieve took time and discomfort. But getting there also allows me to understand that sometimes we're going to be adding words to our lexicons, for example, to our repertoires, to our vocabularies that are not necessarily words that we would have ever envisioned. So like I'm from the older generation, Gen X. By the time I went through my master's program is when the internet came out. We did not have Google back then. Google now is part of like regular vocabulary that we use. And so the fact that we are constantly adding words to our vocabulary, it's something that is important to notice, meaning that then language is never going to stay the same.
It makes me think,
change it.
Yeah, I was just saying, I should have asked how many people out there listening right now are in secondary, that work in a secondary setting. I could only imagine what our teenagers, the words that they are coming and saying, because I don't understand.
Oh, like lit and
yeah.
I mean, I have like a million of them because my daughter is Gen Z. So like she's always saying all kinds of interesting words like are we beefing? I'm like, beefing what? Or like, or you clocked my beef. I don't know. Like, I don't even know what I'm saying. So understanding, yeah, that slang and lingo are also like a great example of that evolution of language. And so if language then is active, then there's only one, there's not just one it, right? We hold many abilities to that. There's a wonderful pedagogy that I'm like completely obsessed with right now. Like, I'll just throw it in so that way you all know. And I'll type it in the thing, but I'll also say it in case you don't know. If there's anybody here in early childhood, the Reggio Emilia pedagogy approach or pedagogical approach is beautiful because it talks about 100 languages.
I think that only went to me. Hold on, let me copy it. Yeah, I'm going to copy it and give it to everyone. But I love this. Elena, I'm calling you out because I love what she said, that she's with preschoolers, but they're already using online slang. I mean, it blows my mind. Okay, hold on. Let me send this out so everyone's got that.
It's called Reggio Emilia pedagogy. Okay, so, and you all can search it and read about it, but it's again, this notion that the child, the person, the human, has over 100 languages that they use all the time. And it is up to the people who are listening and paying attention, perceiving to make sense of what the meaning is that is being expressed. And so for me, as a speech language pathologist and as a university professor and as somebody who's also a photographer, finding this other way of defining language was crucial, but it also made me very curious about like, oh, well, how come is it that SLPs have one way of defining language, something that we use and see and analyze and deal with and enjoy and teach, you know, whatever the word you want to use related to it, we only have one way of defining it. It seems like so narrowing. And then if you work with people who are non-speaking or people who language in ways that are non-traditional, non-linear, where you have to figure it out outside even of AAC devices, like, right?
I'm sorry, you just blew my mind, y'all. I want to make sure everybody just heard what you just said. Because I'm sorry, this is powerful. You were indicating a student that is non-speaking, but oh my God, I just got total chills. How are they languaging? So this is reframing that they're no longer not speaking.
Right.
Wow. How are they languaging and discussing how they are languaging? This is so student-centered and positive focused
it's
versus
person-centered.
Yeah, it's person-centered. Yes.
Yeah. Students are people too.
Yes, I love Jennifer.
So like what Jennifer is saying there is so true. So again, I think that the expansion of language as a verb, like bringing language as being a little bit more, I'm like into, I don't know why I'm saying the word elastic a lot lately, but like think of like language being much more elastic, not like this like little stick
Well, I
blocks
think
of
you're saying
letters,
it's
right?
not rigid. You're trying to
Right.
say it's not rigid. It is fluid, and there's so much more to language
Right. And
because
it always involves each other. So
and
like I think,
movement being a
right.
verb versus a
Yes,
noun being static.
exactly. And it needs the other people that we're communicating with. So like I think that that specific piece that Jennifer has mentioned about it also being about communication is key.
Oh, let's say, those that are just going to be listening after today, Jennifer said it makes her really think about how our field as speech language pathologists really is about communication, not just language or speech. Even though we are speech language pathologists, really we could be communication pathologists.
Or
Maybe,
communication therapists,
yeah.
to take away the pathology piece.
I don't think we want to take away the pathology. We worked hard for that.
No, okay.
I know, but no, you know what? Chime in. Maybe I'm
No,
being a little bit snooty.
No, I think that's a conversation for another time. I think, I understand that in the context of most STEM fields being male dominated and SLP coming when it came into the realm of service, or intervention or rehabilitation. I do think that, there's a truthfulness to it, but also I wonder, like, I don't position myself in that space anymore just because of where I am in my notions of seeing how art and movement and language are all related, and the idea behind it is really making meaning. And so what a great question that Jennifer is just like throwing the little packet, like
I know, I love this. She wants to know
this. Yeah, go ahead.
She's wanting to know if we're talking about languaging and we're throwing the doors open here, and we're talking about it being fluid and movement and a verb. How does this affect establishing norms?
Yeah,
Maria?
and I think that, that's a really beautiful question, because we wonder, we need the norms to serve and give access to services in the systems that we hopefully will continue to have in place. But if you think about it, in some ways, SLPs flex those norms all the time, because when you are person-centered, you're not necessarily using just the score on a standardized test as the only measurement. That's the qualifier to get the person in to your therapy room. But you're doing the magic outside of those boundaries that the standard called were not touchable, right, by the person's abilities or competencies. That said, we all hold these norms in our heads or in our bodies too, like, because we've been taught this way. So I think one way to kind of consider it, because I don't foresee that we're going to be abolishing the rules anytime soon, or the norms anytime soon. I think looking for the ways in which we can add to our definitions of language and to observe what the person across the table, next to us, on the floor with us, is actually doing to communicate, and what are the ways in which they're languaging and flourishing that we have not noticed before because of adhering to the rules. Then what are the ways you can bring that in?
Okay, I'm going to bring this together. I think what I'm hearing is for our speech and language norms, those are still there for eligibility.
Of course.
But what you are bringing in is the communication part of languaging, of like, yes, you have those norms for when we're doing our assessment, but it's more than that. We also can then, we should be held to higher, because we should be picking up and be more aware that languaging is so much more than just speech, grammar, syntax, semantics.
Because otherwise we fall into the trap of then making everybody sound a specific way. We fall into the trap of making everybody use speech, when sometimes how the people language, and we've learned this from neurodivergent folks who are very much insiders in that activism movement, right? That sometimes languaging through stimming is how they language. And so
Yes.
And so why can we relate that to other populations, including ourselves? Like, think about back in your own lives and to like how your language has been scrutinized, even if it's written language, and what are the ways in which you could feel like an exhale Like, you know what? I feel really good by using my little acronyms on the phone when I text, or I feel really good when I don't have to watch my capitalization when I write a note to my loved one before I go out to the grocery store. Like whatever the case may be, where are the, to borrow a phrase that a couple of colleagues of mine, Warda Farah, really, who's the one that came up with the word, and then Vishnu Nair, that have a chapter in a book that's coming out soon. They talk about moments of reprieve. How can you afford yourself and the people that you're working with moments of reprieve when it comes to this normalization of their language in a way that is standardized, right? Like rigid. How can you find the pockets of joy, right?
Pockets of joy.
Pockets of joy. Language is supposed to be joyful. Like that's how we make sense of the world, right?
I do. I make a joke about, I always, when I'm presenting and talking to staff, I'm always like, when in doubt, call me out. I'm delightful.
Yeah, there you go.
So of course, anything cute like that, I love. Pockets of joy. I'm going to steal that. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
So that was basically the premise, and that's already kind of taking us into, so with that notion of like, what are these definitions? And also the fact that beliefs about, which are called norms, right? Beliefs, in this case, norms can be provided by a test, but also they can be held within our bodies too, as the blueprint for how we like look at a person and say, oh, their language is off, their intelligibility is not good, our phoneme is not sounding this way, they're not communicating, not looking at me, right? Like all of these ideas that then say, okay, where are they in the hierarchy of ability and how productive can they be in society? And sometimes that doesn't come from us. Sometimes it can come from doctors. It can come from the families that we're engaging with. It can come from the people who are seeking our services too. So part of our role, I believe, is to at least be aware that there are other ways of defining language and languaging, and also engaging in being very hyper aware of where are these definitions kind of happening in the materials that we use. And so that first article that I published in 2023 then sort of brought me to this space of like, how can I define languaging in a way that makes sense? Because it's like a really complex sort of cloud of beautiful things all together. And then also like, how can we engage? And this is a project that I actually did with my grad students at NYU. You know, how are children's books sharing these ideas about language with kids, and like what can be the impact of those ideas? And so the article that is primarily the focus of this episode and the last episode is an article entitled Strangeness in the Looking Glass, a tutorial for interrogating ideologies of good languaging in children's books. And again, I don't want you to get lost on like the big terminology there. Ideologies mainly just means, or ideologies mainly means like beliefs about language. We all have a belief about what is good language. We all have a belief about who is doing the good language production and who's not doing the good language production. But the main thing is that what I got curious about in everything that I write or research, deep dives, is because I get curious about things. So like also always follow your curiosity, right? Because it can lead you to places like, I have a whole new path now for what I want to do with my life when it comes to this stuff. And apparently some people share the interest in it too. So what we did was we chose 3 children's books, and we analyzed the 3 children's books based on a very open-ended tool. And I want to say that very open-ended because it's really framed as questions. Again, a question posing is super important in our roles as becoming critical users of and consumers of media, of literature, especially nowadays, right? Always, but especially nowadays. And you are there to decide. You have your own compass for what resonates and what doesn't resonate with you. But it's important to know that any material that we choose, that we show to a child, we are showing them the possibility of who they are and who they could become. And so it's a grand responsibility that we should really take pause to analyze, right? And so what we came up with, and the 3 books that Carolyn
I'm trying to get a jump on and get those in the chat.
are,
Oops, I did gibberish twice. So hold
that's
on.
okay, no worries.
Let me get
There's
this one.
3 books that we looked at in the book. They were specifically chosen in the books, in the article. They're specifically chosen because they alluded to, or they really center language. You know, there was a description of the character or characters using their language in a certain way. And then there was sort of a perception of their abilities and also a redefinition of themselves in the process. Okay, so that's really important because it also shows you like what is the impact on the character that could have the same impact on the kiddos that maybe you're reading with, or long term, right? Like
Okay, I'm gonna need, I'm
themselves.
sorry, long day for me. So I'm gonna need you to say that again, that you chose these 3 books because it shows good languaging, but then you explained it even better. So
Well, the 3 books were selected because they center the notion of
that's
the character uses language to communicate, and there is a problem and or something good about the use of that language, right?
okay. Okay.
And so then it shows them in a couple of cases solving the problem that is there with their language, which comes from the ideas, right? The norms that are there within everyone, including the other characters in the story, but also solving the problem. And then what is the impact on their own perception of themselves, right? It always comes down to like, how do we change our views of ourselves? And again, if you think about children, and I want you to, like, I am in my own journey to like reacquaint myself with my inner child and be gentle to my inner child, because I'm always very hard on myself, very sort of like perfectionistic, typical, I think to some extent, the stereotypical speech language pathologist, also a woman of color in a lot of these places. So we hold ourselves to like a really high standard. But I think really knowing like what is the way in which we're then teaching kids to talk about their language or to perceive the way that they communicate, okay? To perceive the way they language. So these 3 books showed a version of that. Okay, and they were specifically chosen for this particular. We analyzed a lot of others, but we didn't publish in those. The tool that we used, Carolyn, do you want to share the bit.ly for the article?
Yes, yes. Okay, hold on. Yeah, I'm gonna get, I think I did already, but I'm gonna do it again. I'm gonna make sure that I send it out one more time. Yeah, here it is. Command, copy. Oh, I was gonna to everyone. Yeah, so just so everybody has this article.
While you're doing that,
Oh gosh, what's wrong with me today?
it's okay.
No,
it's
don't
okay.
answer that. I already know what's
No.
wrong with me today.
No, I wasn't gonna answer anything because we're not judging. But Kim posed a really important question, which is just to make sure, according to this approach, this is not an approach. This is just a lens through which, like, it's a new definition of language. So is stimming language too? Yes, stimming is languaging too. It doesn't mean that you catalog it as good or not good. It's just part of the repertoire of that human who may stim also. Does that make sense? So it is anything that the person uses to be able to communicate anything, even if it's self-calming, even if it's showing you that they're upset by needing to stim, that is languaging. It's communication, right? It's languaging. So what languaging does is wrap both a language as a definition, right? Language is a noun, the object, the structures, blah, 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 blah. A language, code, like Spanish, English, blah, blah, blah. And also this notion of communication, which is a lot broader. It is if it's also communicate. Intent. Also, there's another question. If it's not communication intent, is that not language? Everything that is, whether it has the intent or not that we are perceiving, has language in it. If you meet a non-speaker for the very first time and you're not their caregiver, you don't know what their repertoire is to tell you, like they need to get out of the car or they're not happy with you. By looking at the other way, you're not going to know that what the intent is in that gesture, right? We only know it from practice. So again, that is the complexity of this, is that the role of the partner, and that language doesn't happen in a vacuum inside or on top of the person's head as a little thought bubble. Does that make sense, Tiffany? So yes, to me, stimming has communicative intent. right? And people who work with those individuals also will tell you that. There you go.
Oh, I love this. Michelle just said she has a friend that can have an entire conversation with just facial expressions without even trying to communicate.
Beautiful.
I love that, but I do love reframing the thought of stimming because I do think that it is I mean, I think in the past there was a lot of like, let's get rid of it, let's dampen it, let's try to, replace it. And
And that
now
is not my work, Carolyn. Like
right, but I'm just saying
insiders in the neurodiversity movement have already started saying that, and those are the people that we need to be centering. Not,
Mhm.
I'm not neurodivergent autistic. So I can tell you that that's part of this reframing. So a languaging definition is neurodiversity affirming.
Yes.
In and of itself.
Yes.
And so Tara says, and this could all relate to the idea of body language, nonverbal language, and how it relates to a person's communication as extra linguistic. Absolutely, yes, all of it is languaging. So what the challenge of this is like, right, when we're trying to fit it into like, okay, now we have to write an IEP or we will have to write a goal. Like, how does embodied languaging look in that space? We just did a project on that in my class using an art exhibit that was at the Whitney here in New York. But we don't have time to get into that. That one's coming though. I'm writing that one up to come out soon. But just the notion of like, how can we expand and be flexible with our views of language, and like, what does that do for ourselves? Like, how can we notice new things when we do that with the people that we're engaging with? So I'm going to go back to the tool real quick.
Yeah, I was gonna say, okay, because the first episode when we were going and explaining everything, I think we were kind of wanting, definitely to work through the tools. So how, because I think we're gonna segue now into, okay, now that we know languaging is a verb and it's communication and it's so much more than the norms that have been set in our institutions, and that we really want to be student-centered. So encompassing all of that, we want to also be culturally sensitive, culturally responsive, communicative, responsive clinicians. And we wanted to go into some of the books because the power of the books that we are using, we might not know
Right.
what the book is actually promoting.
Right.
If we're not aware of languaging. Yeah.
So the article that Carolyn should have shared in the link
yeah.
Under Appendix A, and I think this will be also tagged somehow in the podcast version. I'm not sure how that works. There's in the appendix, there is a green and cream and white tool that says questioning language ideologies. And there's 4 dimensions. So these 4 dimensions are what we considered need to be paid attention to when we're looking at books. And you'll notice that considering the context, evaluating the way power shows up, unveiling what might be some of the assumptions about good language, and then assessing what is the potential impact of these assumptions are there as the 4 major dimensions. And then within each of those dimensions, there are 2 questions that you might want to ask. And again, take this and use it. It is very, fluid, kind of like everything else that we do. I didn't want to be too prescriptive because I think it gets really hard to like be able to apply it to different things if we make it too prescriptive. We've used this to look at like handy handouts from Super Duper. We've used this to look at articles that researchers have published, right? Like we've used all of them in using this context. So the first question is, what is the definition of language that is centered in the book? And actually there is another table that is really, I feel it's really explanatory, that has some examples of some of the things that you might look for, right? And that's table 1. So it has under power, what is the predominant definition of language centered in the book? You might find something like that you can answer like, oh, it looks like most of the characters are using a definition of language that is about speech. or about writing, but there isn't anything that involves like movement and touching the grass or play, right? Like all of those are also languaging under this definition. What is the word power shows up would be seen in very specific ways. Either there is one explicit way in which the character is saying like, I really need to learn this way of languaging because it's going to help me be better, right? Or it could be noticed in the way that the text is presented in a book. Like, is there more of one language? If it's a bilingual book, is it more than of the language of power in the place where you're working? In the United States, it's English, right? Is it more English than any of the other language that is supposed to be equally represented? Are the illustrations also showing you some of that representation? So I'll show you in a moment with one of the books. What are some of the beliefs about, is there any notion that language is less good when it's done in a certain way? Not proficient, not native, whatever the case may be. And then what, if any, are there any other definitions of language that you can abstract from the text? Okay. And so, no, and I think that that's a really great question that Jennifer just asked. Are you suggesting that we stop using books that do not meet the criteria of the tool? No, I actually do not suggest that. I would say use the book and know how to engage in conversations. And actually that little article does show a little scenario at the end. I think that's Appendix B that shows an interaction. It's not real, right? It's that kind of like a modeled interaction between the SLP and some children talking about what are the ideas that are in the book, how do they make them feel, and what are other ways in which the problems can be solved, right? Like kids are very smart. We just have to give them the opportunity to like show us how smart they are, right?
So you're saying, yeah, we can absolutely use books, even if they don't fit this criteria.
I say yes.
But when you find something and you want to use the book because it's still a good book,
yeah,
but it might have a little bit of something, that's a teachable moment.
That is a wonderful.
So use it as a teachable.
Listen, we have enough banning as it is.
Yeah.
For me to tell you, let's ban these books. Like some of these are also like authentic experiences. So the first one to show you, which I know Carolyn shared, is Areli is a dreamer. And Areli was this is a autobiographical children's book written by a DACA recipient. Her name is Areli, okay, Areli Morales. And she wrote a story based on like her experience. So she starts in Mexico, her family comes to the United States. Later, they finally ask for help for her, right? Like for those of us who have crossed geographic borders, sometimes that's how it works. Some part of your family arrives first, and then they request you so that you can come with documentation to the country. Or with some degree of support. And so they asked for her to come by, and then she basically talks a little bit about what is her experience in school, learning English. And so I'm not going to read all of it to you, but already I can tell you, like if we ask one of the questions, like what is the predominant way in which language is defined, if you read the book, she talks a lot about speaking Spanish with her grandmother before she comes to the United States, and then having to learn English. That's a certain definition of language. That's that language is a noun, right? Definition. And it's also a lot about speaking, and also because she's in school, it's also about learning to read and write. And what's interesting about this book that I think is important, I'll get to the examples, is that the book does do an interesting job at positioning also place or geography, and also noting that depending upon where you are, signage is also going to represent the language of power there. So when she was back in Mexico, all of the signs like to the library and other places were in Spanish. When she arrives in New York, I believe it is, all of the signs become English, which is not necessarily the case because in New York, we have a lot of signage. We do a lot of neighborhood projects here. But one of the examples of Areli had to go to school, but the teachers did not know her name. She couldn't speak English. And when she tried, the words came out all wrong. Okay, so already This is a real experience. She's telling you she couldn't speak English, but that when she tried, they would have come out all wrong. So what are the ways in which, what is the predominant definition of language there? Is through speech, is in English, right? And anything that it doesn't come out that way is not right. So that's a belief already. That's a stereotype. Also, she's being positioned as a person who doesn't speak. Then it happens that says she made friends with the other girls who could speak Spanish, but she couldn't stop kids from teasing her. Arely is an illegal. They should take her back to Mexico. Arely can't read. She's so backward. Again, what are the ways in which hierarchies or stereotypes about language and norms are being presented? It's not that this is not true and that this doesn't happen, but again, how are we engaging in making sure that those wounds are not being inflicted on the kids, that then they see themselves that way? And why that is important is because at the end of this book, and then I'll show you too, what is called the alternate definition of language that I talk about, is she's in the subway in New York, and it says, pretty soon, it was hard for Arely to remember how the sun shone on the mountains at Abuela's house. Now she spoke English like any other girl from America. She played jump rope games and watched TV shows. And again, there's a definition there, right, that suggests that language is more than just about the code that we use and the way to communicate, but that it holds our memories. I think that's really important. Language as memory, right? Because we know that maybe when we used to talk to grandma, or when we used to sit at grandma's, my grandma used to tell stories. She was Italian. It was about the war and growing up in Naples, Italy. You know, that the words that she would use in her Italian and Spanish at the time in the Dominican Republic is very, like, I go back to them a lot in my mind, right? And so again, it's not that you don't use this book. You should use this book. This is an authentic experience of someone, right, who is alive, walking around in our life and world. But what are the ways in which you can make sure that you can be critical of what is there? Notice what is there. When I mean critical, I mean like notice, make note of it. And don't be scared to engage with the kids. Like, ask questions like, how does it make you feel? They might tell you, oh, my sister makes fun of the way that I speak because I sound like, she tells me that I don't sound like I speak English, right? Or so-and-so was teasing me because they said that I don't know how to speak English. Like, some of that may come out, and then that's an opportunity to talk about. That is well within the realm of what we do as SLPs. There's no reason why we shouldn't be engaging with that, right? And I think sometimes we're very scared to touch upon those things, obviously, depending on the climate and institution where we're working on. So that's one example of the book. And then, how much time do I have, Carolyn?
Oh, no, we're still good. We're still good.
Okay.
But I love the fact we were getting some great responses. I might say your name wrong. I'm sorry, Carl. I'm so sorry. It says, it makes me reflect on how powerful language is, both positive and negative, and how much it informs how we see the world. And I think that is really, that boils down to what we're wanting to do between the first and this episode, is really talking about the power of language and how we need to really be aware of the power behind what we're doing. And yeah, you're not saying don't use a book. Like, that book is showing how she felt that she was wrong, she was bad, she wasn't smart. Great opportunity to talk about differences, and that of course, of course she's not wrong. It's, it's different. She's learning another. Oh, Carol, thank you. I love it. You're Carol. I'm Carolyn. I love your spelling. Thank you for letting me know. I should have, you know what? I should have if I would have been the wherewithal, I should have texted you right? I should have used a different communication.
All right. That's okay. So here we're languaging in different ways. It's amazing what we're doing. And I think that's the other piece about is the notion that those, even if we notice that there is potentially harmful language in the books that we choose, what are the ways in which we can rewrite the language.
Yes, right.
And in terms of like our, you know, in particularly in the case of memories, that would be a great opportunity to talk about what are other ways in which you can remember. Can you draw the mountains? Can you, do you
Mhm.
remember the smells that you had whenever you were walking around in the field or visiting abuela or whatever the case may be, right? Or what was it like to look at the sun? What colors did you see? There's a lot of other ways. And again, that's language too. That's languaging,
Mhm.
right? That is why this is so powerful, because it moves beyond exactly like Kim said just now, multisensory. And that's exactly where we want to go. When we look at a definition of languaging, of shifting our definition from language as something static into languaging, then we're looking at multimodality, multisensorial. And that is what we are, y'all. Like, we are not just one dimension, because that would be very boring. Okay, the other book that I used was also written by an immigrant, Young Vu, and it's called Gibberish. And I chose this book because it talks about, it kind of assumes that what the person is saying, the character is saying, is not understood. And I feel like that's something that SLPs, we deal with this conundrum all the time. It's like, what does it mean to be understood? What does it mean to be intelligible? How do we define it? Sometimes we attach a number to it. We know that it changes, and that over time our ears become very accustomed to what we're listening to. And so we can actually understand things that we didn't think we could understand before. What I love about this book too is that most of the beginning of the story, I don't know if you, I mean, you're not gonna be able to see, but for the people who are here, it has a lot of the beginning of the story has illustrations in like grayscale. So like kind of like black and white, dull. And the characters communicate through a set of emojis on a call out. Little text box, meaning like, you know, like how we communicate, like how it's represented in comics.
Instead, not a speech bubble, but
like a speech bubble. Yeah, like a speech
text
bubble. Yeah, like a speech bubble, but it has a bunch of like unintelligible to us, right? Language in it that doesn't even look like words. It's just like a star, a flower, a sandwich, a taco. I don't even know. And then the child is the text from that box is translated into English next to it to kind of show the reader what it was that the character was saying. But again, it's very similar to Ariel. Dab goes through the process of also feeling like he has nobody to play with, right? Because he doesn't speak the language, no one to play with. So Dad walked, hello, my name is Dad, like saying it himself in those little emoji things, until he finds a friend who finally sits down with him and is able to engage in that emoji language, and they draw together. And that moment of drawing together and playing together becomes the moment of connection and the moment of making meaning. And again, that is why, again, the expansion of language into like, how is language positioned is still English is what goes. It still has to be intelligible, or you're not considered smart enough, right? And so like when you don't produce it in a certain way, but this notion that we can language through art, we can language through movement and play with each other, through relating to each other is also there. And so like, that's another one that has its problems, but it's like really powerful to engage with, and thinking like, what are the ways in which you play? What are the ways in which sometimes you have a hard time playing with your friends, right?
I just want to stop because Jennifer, thank you so much for your words. I just need to read this out loud. She says, as I'm hearing you speak, what I'm hearing is that we should be verbally affirming and acknowledging our students' communication modalities and languaging for all students, including neurodiverse and second language learners. Boom, chakalaka. I love it. You just
That's
beautiful.
exactly what languaging does.
Yes.
Bring in neurodivergent students and anybody who speaks many, many varieties of a code into one umbrella. Like, we're all together in it, right?
I think it's bringing this belonging that we might not all have the same language, but we are all languaging.
Right. And as such, we all carry the responsibility to observe, co-learn, and make meaning with each other. That is not something that is like that simple, that just happens, right? And so the last book that you might have known already if you are a speech language pathologist, but if you're not, is A Day with No Words by Tiffany Hammond, who is detailing the life of her autistic son, a day in the life of her autistic son. And and so this book is very different because it comes narrated from the mother's perspective and the child's perspective, and the child uses a speech generating device. And it shows the child going to the park and the children in the park making assumptions while the child is doing some of his languaging in other ways. And so there's a portion of the book that is just like poetry for me, that kind of alludes to this notion of sometimes we pathologize language based on what we learn and what we have to do to qualify humans into our caseloads. But that if we ask the person at the center, the neurodivergent languaging or languager, language user, right, then we might get a very different perspective. So there's a section of this book, and the illustrations are beautiful too. I so recommend this book. I do things many people do not understand. I like to stare through the parted fingers of my right hand. I comfort the trees with hugs when the sun disappears. I like to spin barefoot on soft grass after the rain clears. And so, and the notion that the mother knows that that is a way in which he languages too. And so again, here it expands to things that we, neurotypical human beings who may be, self-identify as neurotypical because we don't language in this way, may consider that that's behavior that doesn't have a purpose, that doesn't have communicative intent, because it's engaging with the natural world, what some people call the more than human world, right? Like there's literature, like doing research and play with the more than human environment. And yet narrated from a human who is an insider as a neurodivergent autistic, there's meaning there. There's meaning to him, there's meaning to his mother. And so can we understand, and there's some really powerful work that has been done by a colleague of mine, who's a special ed teacher, Lily Padilla, P-A-D-I-A. P-A-D-I-A. She was my doc student at NYU. Lily is her first name.
L-I-L-I?
L-I-L-L-Y.
Why? Okay.
Padilla, P-A-D-I-A. She did a study observing families with non-speaking autistic children during the pandemic, and also interviewing speech language therapists. And sometimes it's interesting because SLPs would say like, oh, this person has no language. And then Lily would go to the playground and observe this child interacting and languaging with the sibling in ways that were completely incredible. The sibling knew exactly what the child was meaning. So the power of languaging within the families and the fact that families have their own systems of communication is also so important for SLPs to continue learning, right? And so again, this is another way. And maybe the little person who's in your classroom or who you're working with has a sibling who communicates in this way. Imagine like their excitement to see this kind of languaging represented. Okay, I'm gonna finish with one book that is a recent find. Is that okay?
Oh, okay. Yes. We have time. Yep.
Okay.
I was just, I just put in Lily, and her articles are popping up, and I was going to try to get that, but
Yeah,
I want you to.
That. You can
yeah,
do that
but no, I
anytime.
want you to do this book.
So I am obsessed with children's books. I have been for many, many years, but now I am obsessed with finding books that actually address like this notion of like language. So like behind me, I have one that's called How to Speak in Spanglish, which is beautiful because a lot of the times we get a lot of bad rap for using our languages, quote unquote, mixed, because we're not supposed to be proficient. And if we use them mixed, and this actually models it beautifully. There's an older book called No English behind it. I'll give Carolyn a list of all of these. The No English one is a good one because it actually has all of the old ideas about what good English production is and what not good English production is, which are still very prevalent in education in the field, and I think are going to still come about again. But I found this, well, actually my colleague found this and sent it to me. It's called This Is How I Talk, a celebration of disability and connection. And it is by Jessica Slice, like a slice of cake. Carolyn Cup, with two P's. Isn't that great? I just realized that they're both like food related and you're in with dysphagia. And illustrated by Kayla Heron. One of the authors is disabled. And what I love about it is that, listen, I'm not big into like woo-woo, let's be diverse books because I find them very surface, but we need a book that shows communicative diversity, and you all, this one shows it. It shows people, it says, let me read it this way. We sign, we write, we clap, we tap, we stim, we scream. So many ways to talk and joke, play, learn, and dream. This is how we talk. And then he goes into, I yell, mama, when I feel joy. You always seem be my happy boy. To say I love you, I hold her hand. We don't need words. We just understand. And so there's the non-speaking piece. There's a section where the person is signing, using sign language. There's a person where a child only uses head movements to communicate or to language. There's a time when they show a mother who's also disabled, so that way you can see that, which often is not shown. There's we're heading out to the parade. I'm excited and a bit afraid. I say I'm scared there at the door by falling down onto the floor. So we know like toddlers do that, right? But that's also languaging. So again, the notion of communicative diversity, everybody who's an SLP should have this because it's brilliance personified. That's all I'm going to say. So I'm going to finish there.
I love it. Will there be handouts to download? Kim, when Maria,
Maria's
yes.
fine. Maria Rosa is fine.
Yeah, I know. Sorry. Yeah. Maria Rosa, will send me a list of books and we will have that uploaded then, with this podcast, because definitely, but hopefully everybody has, what am I saying?
The article, the tool,
the article, and I gave you the books. Oh, listen, we got some more. Okay, Jennifer, thank you so much. She says we need follow-up webinars on how to assess and write conclusions and diagnosis and goals from this lens of languaging. I agree. I mean, I think you are moving us, Maria Rosa. You are moving us, that we really need to look beyond the noun of language and bring it to verbing. Oh, Benji, I love this. They loved the falling on the floor being viewed as languaging, right?
Right.
And not just behavior.
Listen,
you know?
3 weeks ago, before I could have 2 weeks off for the very first time since 2017 as a professor, okay, for the summer, I wanted to be that toddler throwing myself on the floor. It would not be cute if I did it, but that's what I wanted to do. It certainly would show my feelings.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think everybody is, hopefully everybody that is listening and will be listening is going to be wanting you, Maria Rosa, to continue with this work, because I think we are thirsty for more knowledge, because we are always trying to strive for more, for better, because when we know better, we do better. We do,
and this is good for all of us. And I'll finish with this just because I have the opportunity.
Yes.
This is not solo work. I don't want to do this work by myself. So if there's an interest that you have, pop me a little note via email. I have a colleague I'm working on this with. We have a website we're working on. It's called Liberated Languaging. And we eventually will have workshops. But more than anything, I learn best in community. And so if you all have an opportunity and want to co-learn with us, like that would be amazing. And hopefully we can do that in the next,
okay,
6 months to a year.
I am now just putting in Maria Rosa's website. There it is. And then before everybody goes, don't go yet. I want to do one more. I want to do the next could you just speak to the next project that you're doing?
Oh, okay. Yes. So, I mean, I have a lot of things going on, but
I
right
know.
now I have two strands. One strand is working with an ed theater faculty member at NYU, and we're looking for speech language therapists' ideas of good languaging. We're interviewing them, and then we're creating what's called an ethnodrama piece based on those, where like actors read the responses. The other thing I'm doing is this liberated languaging. This is my life's work, by the way. Like now I'm really into like, what are the ways in which you can teach this? We can teach this way. We can engage this way. Eventually, what are the ways in which we can create goals and also not so much assessments, but like documentation around it? What are the ways in which we can, I'm going to borrow from Reggio Emilia pedagogy. What are the ways in which we can make languaging and learning visible for the kids and adults and humans that we are engaging with? What are the ways in which that can be made visible without us feeling like we are having to like count all the numbers? Something extra. Think about art, think about exhibits, think about things like that. So I feel like that's where my life is taking.
I love it. I love it.
Mhm.
I know that everybody has just absolutely enjoyed this. Don't forget to go back and I gave the link for your first episode. So if you love this one, go back, listen to the first one, then re-listen to this one. I mean, it is changing. It is life changing. It really does shift our view. And thank you everybody for listening today. Maria Rosa, I cannot thank you enough for coming back. I think everyone is as moved as I am. And it's been because we know it's been so interactive. I've loved this. I love Jennifer. I love this. We got to
Jennifer, that's beautiful. That's a great one to close.
Let's close with what Jennifer said.
Yeah.
Perhaps it comes down to intent and purpose that's driving our therapy for all clients. It is not to fix anyone.
Woo!
Oh,
Goosebumps.
that was perfect.
That was
And with
beautiful.
that, my friends, we must say goodbye. I want to say thank you again, Maria Rosa. I want to thank
you.
everybody and remind everyone before you go, please, 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 if you are needing live CEUs, please go to your Speech Therapy PD account and fill out the modules before the end of today. And hey, I want you all to come back for our next episode. School of Speech is my little dream and I love it. And so I hope to see everybody on the next episode of School of Speech. So I want to say goodbye.
Yeah.
Bye, everyone.